Hi guys, this is Nate from Reach 3D Printers. Today we are going to do a very quick SketchUp tutorial. I've got SketchUp 2015 and you can download this for free. You can go ahead and start using SketchUp. You can also choose a template. I don't know if you guys saw that up top. I choose MakerBot, I believe, or well, basically the template just puts you in millimeters. Ignore this, you probably won't have that error. So yeah, it already set it up for room, what the MakerBot Replicator 2 can print volume. Let's see here. So just a really quick tutorial. This is mostly for people who have never really CAD modeled. So if you have some CAD model experience, you may not want to sit through this. Let's see. Let's start with basic mouse buttons. Left mouse button, your regular clicker. If you drag it, you can select multiple objects that are in the bounding box. If you drag from top right or top left to bottom right, if you drag that way, it'll select multiple. If you drag this way, it will select anything that touches that bounding box. So I could give you a for instance real quick. Let me just make two circles. So your arrow up here is your main selection tool. So if I click like this, it's gonna catch this item too. Whoops. So it caught both of them. If I go this way, it's not gonna select that. It's only gonna select that. See how that worked? So that's kind of the difference, and that's important to know, that little feature. It depends which direction you select. If you're trying to select this and you don't get all of it at the bottom, it's not going to select anything. Now you have your scroll, which hopefully your buttons are set up to zoom in, zoom out, and then you also can orbit, is what this is called, and that's holding down your scroll center mouse button, and then right clicking will give you, on an object, will give you information that you could do to it. I found that Orient and reverse faces come in pretty handy. So if you got something that's well, let me just do a quick little something like that. Okay, so this is a cylinder, and let's say this thing was backwards, like it was dark blue or dark gray. Well, if you tried to convert that into an STL, it may not recognize this face. Google Sketchup, yeah, I mean, it's pretty good to start, but this is all like point-to-point kind of work. So when you're getting into it, you may look at that and say, well, I need to reverse that face. What if there's like a ton of faces, like all over the place, that are reversed? Well, you can right-click on the face colors that you like, the outside faces, and hit Orient Faces. Boom. So it'll turn all of the rest of them. Okay, so you may have just noticed this push-pull tool. Well, you can create circles. You can drop that down and create rectangles, a single click, and then a single click. This is the push-pull, or some might call it extrude. You'll notice the face turns a little hash marky or dotted. You can click once and drag up. Sometimes in this program, if you click and move quick, it'll deselect it. So click and then move. See how it deselected it? Oh, that one disappeared. Well, and then see, boom, I went all the way through it. So there are some issues where, and then reorient the faces to that one. So you also have your origin here. That's important to note. So let's say we wanted to get this box. Let's say we have a hard time selecting it by itself. You can click, click, click. So the first click is going to click just a face. 2 clicks will click what that face touches, and 3 clicks in a row will select everything that is connected to it, even if you have a random line sticking out. And you do a triple click, 1, 2, 3, it'll select everything that's touching. Delete, if it's selected, you can just delete it. Okay, now notice that this only selects one side. Well, what happens if you want the whole object? Well, okay, before we get into that, there's another pan option. Pan is super important, and you can use it with orbit. So there's orbit and pan, and these two buttons allow you to get around the face and reposition and zoom in, and it makes it really easy to navigate. In order to change your orbit into pan, just hold down shift. That's all it takes. Okay, so let's say we click this whole thing, and we can either select it all, and you can grab it by a corner, and sometimes it goes off weird, and you're like, I don't want it to go off weird, I want it to stay straight on the green axis. You can hold down shift, and it will lock it into the direction it's going. And blue would be your vertical axis, right? So get it onto the blue, hold down your shift, notice it turns it darker, and then you can keep it on that axis. Another cool thing is, let's say you wanted to keep it at the Z height only, you can keep holding that shift and set it there. What if you want the bottom to be at 0, 0, 0? You can do it that way. You can individually grab that corner and set it to your point. Another option is, if it's a point that you know it'll snap to, then you can just haul it into that point and click. Another idea is that if this whole thing is a group, so if you select it all, you can turn this into a group. And so you right click and say make group. And so now you can't access individual parts. You have to double click to get into it, and then this gray bounding box around the edges says you're in this part, at which point you can individually alter the components. So let's say you're wanting to change this face, where you can use the move key, and you can grab a hold of the midpoint or here. If the whole thing's selected, then it will move that whole part. If nothing is selected, and you can deselect stuff by hitting escape, if nothing's selected and you grab a corner, it's going to apply the movement of that point to all those corners. And it can be hard to know what's actually going on, but it's going to add some folds and stuff in there to make that geometry work. If you didn't mean to do that, you can hold down Control Z and click Z, and it'll undo it. Step back, just like every other program on Earth. If you're in this bounding box and you're trying to deselect something, but you don't want to leave the group, then you click between the bounding. If you want to leave this group, click outside of it, and you're back out. Let's say you want to make a bunch of these. You can make it a component. Now that is a really cool feature, because now this thing is considered a component. So you can make copies of objects by hitting Control, or I'm sorry, just hitting Control. Is that tiny little plus sign at the bottom of your cursor. Well, you just click it once on whatever point you want, and let's say we're not sure exactly how far it is, but we know that we want it, maybe we want it exactly 300 millimeters away. You can type in 300 on the length down there and hit enter, and it will move it 300 millimeters from where you grabbed it and copied to where you told it to go. And you can check that. There's a ruler function. You can grab here and feel it out, and it will kind of snap to, and it will verify that it's 300 millimeters. Okay, now remember we made this a component. Components just mean that they're repeated pieces. If you double click and go back in, look, it shows it. So let's jump back out. Let's make another part that's similar, but it's not the exact same. So we built a little face, a box. We can lift it up, and you can even set that height of it to whatever point you want to in comparison to another object. Okay, so even if we make this a group, right, so that you can go into it, see the others disappear? If you go into this component, it disappears. So you can do like classes of stuff. Well, I guess that's a term for it. Now why this does this is because if you make a change, let's say we want to put a hole through here, take a circle, and let's say we want to put a hole right here. We don't exactly know where that is, but we got a hole there. Or we got a circle there, we don't have a hole. And then you'd use the extrude and or push pull, and you can push into that surface. and if it meets flat with the bottom surface, it'll actually create the hole. So that's pretty cool. And notice it did it over here. Now that's only because it's a component. Like this item right here, it's a group, but it's not a component. We can do the same thing where we take the move tool and we hit the control button, and now it's got a plus sign. That means we're copying, and we just place it wherever. Well, if you go into one of these groups, it'll make the other one disappear because that other one is not the same part. Another thing you can do is you can copy multiple items. So if different stuff is selected, grab your move tool and control, and then click it, grab it over, set it wherever. If you alter one of these, they're all going to be part of the same component group. Let's say two of them you want a little bit different because you want a different hole somewhere else. Well, you can select those two. You can either try to only grab them, or if you grab everything from the bottom right, that's a super cool feature to know how to use quickly. Or you can hit shift. Like I can choose this one, hold down shift, choose this one, and say, oh, I didn't want to choose this one, and just still with shift held, you can deselect it, add or remove it from the selection. So these two we want to make a separate component. So you can select them both, right click, and say make unique. Now what that does is it makes them still both a component, and these are both still a component, but these two components here and here are components with each other. So when you select that one, it says, hey, that's a component. And still this one, only this one's a component. So you can also say make unique individually, and it becomes its own component. And this one no longer is the same as that component. You can also continue to, oops, if you deselect it, you'll have to go back in and select it. You can also continue to make copies, something like that. And this one and this one, these two will still be components, and these two will still be components. And then these two were the two that we made unique together. Alright, so that's a quick tutorial on a majority of basic functions that you might find yourself doing. I'm going to go into these boxes over here. There's a lot of other things you can do as well. Let's say you're using the free version and you want like a dome. Now, maybe I shouldn't get into that yet. There's so many other things I should show first. Okay, this is a snap too, so it'll like kind of grab points right here and here. So this is like a snap point, so it's right at the middle of the two. So you can bisect stuff really quickly. But let's say you wanted to like split it into three. Well, that's a lot more complicated, but I don't think this program makes it easy to do that. You would literally have to take those numbers. Let's say it's 104 millimeters. What you would have to do is divide 104 by 3, and that's roughly, I don't know, 35 maybe. So let's just say it is 35. So you would click your point that you want to create and follow it out in the direction of the green or whatever direction, and you would say 35. So you type that in, it should show up at the bottom as length, hit enter, and then you will have a new point. That endpoint is green there. I don't know if you guys saw that. Endpoint show up green. Where did it go? That's a midpoint, and it's offset, so we know that the endpoint is going to be further out. So then you can use that and attach it to however you want. So, and then if you want to do another 35, because it was a complex, long, decimated number, as long as it was the last command you typed in, you can repeat it by Where is 35? There it is. Eventually, if you get it just in the right position, it'll actually tell you edge 35. If it was truly the very center point, the midpoint would be the same if you're doing like thirds. But it's a little off. Another thing you can do to copy links is just select that, right? And grab it by the corner and hit Control once and then slide it over and reconnect it to the end. That would do the same exact thing. So even though that's not quite thirds, that's one method to achieve that. This push-pull tool is really neat for quickly building complex stuff. You can individually grab corners. I was showing you that earlier. Some stuff works okay, but then some stuff you may have to hold down the shift to get it to go straight because it won't actually try to connect. But if you hold down shift to get it to go straight, you can then attach it to points. So shift is a really common tool. In fact, I keep my fingers over here by the control and by the shift button. If you try to pull a face like that, it's going to do interesting things. Again, I can't grab one of those. I want that face to stop right at this line. So if you hold down shift, you should be able to grab that line. Let's see what else there is. Let's say you wanted a hole. No, let's do something more complicated. Let's say we wanted to put a hole through a rod. This is starting to get a little more complex. For SketchUp, if you have the Pro version, Tools, Window, I don't even know where the Pro version would indicate where these tools are. There it is. There's solid tools, and those use like poly surfaces and things like that. That's if you buy SketchUp, and you know SketchUp's like, I think it's like $300 to $500, something like that. So you can do almost everything in this point and click. This is just what I use. I started pretty early on it a couple years back, and I just got really familiar with it. So let's say we're trying to put a hole through this, and we want that hole to be a cylinder. That can get kind of tricky, but I will show you how I do it. Is that centered? Yeah, that looks like it's centered. Basically, I just do a little something like. See, I'm looking for the color of the axis when I'm like drawing around. I wouldn't want to draw this way if I'm trying to create a flat plane right here. I'd want to find the blue axis, hold shift, come up to this point, select it, and then I've got a face. And this is just the beginning of how I would perhaps draw a hole that is exactly 10 millimeters below, but the hole is 5 millimeters in radius, 10 in diameter. So I grab the circle tool and draw it up to that 5, and I can double check that, but this should be 5. That's 10. And then I would delete those lines. The next thing I would do would be to use the push-pull tool, and it just travels right through it, right? Well, this is the beginning of it. It's not too complex, and the bigger you design these, typically the better. Now, if I deleted this, notice I'm deleting the end. I would lose all these faces in here, so that wouldn't be good. Control Z. But if I just delete the face, and then you know, you may have to do a few little select all kind of things. And this has that cylinder face right there in it, so that's not going to work, right? Delete this and look at it. If you want that face back on, you can either Control Z, or there's other ways to put faces back on there. A lot of times you can just repeat a segment, and it will try to fill in anything that segment might have completed. But how would I do this? So I would select the barrel, I guess you could call it, the outside, and then I would hold down Shift and select this one. And then I would right click and say Intersect Faces with Selection. And you'll notice thin little lines wrap around there now. Sometimes you get problems with this, but we'll go ahead and delete this face. Actually, let me show you. This face is now separated from this face with this line. So you can delete that, double click to delete that, double click, and now the last thing you would have to do is delete what's covering. Oh, that's another feature for moving. What if you want to center your screen way over here? Double click the so if I'm like right over here and I want to see over here, double click the wheel and it will center it to your screen. So then notice this is a light blue or a light gray and this is a dark gray, so we need to reverse this face. You can either individually do it, double check it. So now we got a through hole. And of course we need to put the face back on top. You can also like do stuff like bisection to complete faces. There's other things that can occur in the model. It's good to take a look at your model when it's finished and make sure stuff like that doesn't occur, because on occasion when you do a push-pull you may have like a face that's disconnecting this piece from the base, so you may want to kind of just look inside there. Maybe you don't want to delete a face. You can zoom through a wall, but typically your zoom is going to zoom in and zoom in and zoom in, and you finally get through it. And perhaps you just saw what I just did, but you can get through walls a lot faster by orbiting. You can orbit right outside of them and orbit right out through the walls instead of like zooming and zooming and zooming, because the more you zoom and the closer you get, the less the zoom percentage is, and it's just kind of a pain. So I prefer to grab a distant area and orbit from around that distant point. Okay, I was talking about a dome earlier. I'll go ahead and jump into that because it's pretty cool to do. Okay, notice I can't. What I want to do is create an arch across here, but it's sticking to the flat surface, so I can't get the. Now that's what I want. See how that is? And now also notice these little dots lifting up. Well, you can hit Shift and it will lock those dots on, and it will lock the orientation of that circle. So you can click the midpoint, and then hopefully you guys can see that on the screen. There's a green arch coming out the top. Now that may do stuff under here too, but if that bottom piece isn't connected, then we should be able to delete that. Now we just deleted the face, which means inside here there's still a thin little rim. Yep, see that rim in there? Since this is a line segment or a group of line segments that ends at an endpoint, you can delete this without worrying about deleting the top. So this top piece wasn't deleted. So here's what we're looking at. Now here's what I often do. I'll bisect this and then delete just the outside. Well, if this outside's gone, the face can't exist, so it'll delete the face as well. What I often do is use what's called the follow tool, or follow me. You may have to go into the toolbars and actually add it to your toolbar, but follow me is a cool tool, and you click on a surface and then you can drag that surface around a curve, and you can even kind of move around while you're doing this, and usually it does a pretty good job of figuring out what you're talking about. If the item is too small, like less than a millimeter, then it has rendering issues in that. So let's jump up here, and sometimes it will delete the face. I think it has. So I'm just coming up out of the dome kind of thing. It looked like it deleted the flat face that was on top of this. Yeah, it did. Okay. Another thing you can do is if you find yourself like way out away from the model, you can hit Control Z. No. Shift Z. Shift Z will relocate you. My Control Z actually undid the follow me, so Control Y? Yeah. Control Y redoes whatever your last action was. And you can do that several back. You can like literally break down your model slowly, undoing everything you did. If you find yourself you went really messed up, I think you can also just hold the button to redo it. You don't have to sit there and click it every time. Yeah. Now it only goes back maybe like 50 to maybe 100 procedures, and even exiting a model is considered a procedure. So there's not a whole lot more that you really need to be able to achieve to make cool stuff. Placing holes is your biggest thing with a 3D printer, let's say. So if you you know, there's this measurement tool. So if you need this to be placed 30 millimeters out, it'll leave like a little spot for you, and you can kind of get on that guide point. Let's see. I think you can, maybe not. Well, you can make sure when you click that guide point is selected. But you can work off that guide point 30 millimeters, 30 millimeters, and you can double check your links down here. And then let's say that's the center where the hole needs to be, and your hole has a 10 millimeter radius. Then, I mean, that's how you do it. I don't know about hiding or deleting guides. I don't typically use guides, but you can see there's a little bit of a blue selection on it. So I think I just got the guide. Then you can delete them. You can also dimension stuff if you're wanting to do like a little more professional. Tools, dimensions. I think if I do it this way, it'll give me, yeah. These dimensions will keep their size relative to the screen. You can select them, double select them, reduce the information in there. So there you have it. You can also delete the, I almost deleted the whole model because I jumped out of the group. Go back into it. You can, you can delete it. And of course, to finish the whole, you'd want to send it through. Now this is interesting. So I sent that through and I hit it to that point, but there's nothing there. So what happens now? Well, there's a few ways to do this, but there's something I want to try to do. Every once in a while, Google does some strange things. SketchUp does. See if I can get it to do it. Yeah, it's not going to want to. On occasion, if your models are a little bit messy, like let's say we're going to Control Z. Okay. All right. What we're going to do is intentionally mess this up. Let's say your model, everything should be true, 100%. But let's say one of these lines didn't quite land where it was supposed to be. So let's say we go up 0.01 millimeters, just a tiny bit up and off. It looks fine, right? Like, it doesn't look like there's anything wrong with it. But if you click on that corner and draw your way down, hold shift, well, aha, okay, this one shows a 0.01, this one shows a 0.00, this one shows a 0.00. So they're saying that this one right here is 0.1 lower, I think. It could have been higher. Well, what happens if this flat surface isn't truly flat? And how do you even know if it's not? Well, you can go to View and you can select Hidden Geometry. Well, if it had a curve in it, it would show it better, but I don't think that's enough to be off. It can be, though. So if I go, let's say 0.05. Still didn't do it. Figured it would have showed up in the Hidden Geometry. But 0.01. Must have tried to round it to the closest thing. Well, this one has a 0.01 difference, so let's go ahead and throw a hole there and see what happens, because it could create problems. Okay, now here's what we've got. Since we know that this is out of whack, Part of this looks like it's not connected, and then part of it looks like it is connected. And then we also have two faces on here doing weird stuff. Like, that's not normal. So to give you an example of what normal should be, you would, I can look at both of these at the same time. Alright, so this one is the theoretically normal one. It should have deleted that face, but instead it gave you two. So if you try to select this, it'll select the whole thing, and you delete, and bam, it's gone. Well, okay, we can redraw that. Let's delete this, and then let's go ahead and redraw the side. Should be good. Well, now what's going on? If I select this, it selects the whole thing again, and then if I delete, it deletes the whole thing again. Well, it's because one of your corners is out of spec. There are ways to get around this if you don't want to like keep everything perfect, and that's by remapping the bottom surface. So you could do that by drawing lines from their endpoints to the edges of that bottom surface. Now, if you notice, this whole circle just lightened up, which means it attached to the face. So basically what we have done is we have taken this line and then slowly curved it in a new position so that it took the face and folded it together just slightly, and this curve is now slightly folded as well along this point right here. And that's a quick fix, and you can even delete these sometimes, and it will try to balance everything out mathematically. But it's a dirty way to go, and it can give you problems down the road, so at your own risk. Another thing, if you got intersecting things going on that are insane, just select everything. Sometimes these can be really close. See how close those are? It can try to create like a double edge here when you would think that it wouldn't need to. And you're right, it doesn't need to, but that's SketchUp. It's a free program. We can't bash it. It's pretty decent for being free. I know there's other programs like Tinkercad and whatever you're familiar with. After a while, you can get pretty used to this kind of stuff. You also have an eraser tool to hasten the process. Try to avoid hitting the edges. So, as you can see, you can do some pretty cool stuff with this. See what it did there? It's resurfaced the faces when I deleted this and this. So, it can do some strange things if you're out of whack. And you can even measure that by clicking that and looking at your distances. That one looks even. 0.01, 0.00. So perhaps if we lifted this problematic face, sometimes you can fix this. So make sure you're on the blue, even to face. Now the problem is this one has been tilted right here. So because you tilted this circle, when you redrew that line through it, it threw that off. There's other things you can do. One thing you can do is select the whole bottom. You can take this thing, and with the move button you can pull it down 1 millimeter, and then you can move this up 1 millimeter from the same point that you drew it down. You can then encompass the whole thing. Make sure it's going red or green to know that you're on a flat surface. And then you can select everything below this, delete it, and you're pretty close. What happened to this side? See, this hole had an issue when you deleted it, when I deleted it. Whoever deleted this thing messed it up. So, you know, you want to avoid like getting stuff out of whack. That's all I'm saying. Try to avoid things like that because it can create headaches for you down the road. But the good news is you can totally recover. Orient Faces. Okay. So when I oriented the faces, there was like, see this on-off going on. It doesn't know what to do is what it comes down to. It's got two faces that don't make sense to itself. and it looks like we had a problem with a double line existing too close. So kind of like that double line there. Let's Orient Faces. I bet it'll clean up. Yeah, most of that cleaned up. Again, SketchUp has some issues when it's trying to deal with curves. I bet this is the point that is supposed to come down here. Yeah, and then this one, there's no connector here. There we go. So it's workable. And you know, how many times do you create parts that have intersecting domes and curved surfaces? A lot of the stuff that, you know, we make are going to be pretty square stuff. I should probably also oh yeah, that was something interesting. If you have a surface selected and you go to like extrude and you're like, how come it won't let me select the face? Because it's thinking that you're going for this face. So if you try to click that, it's going to move that one. But that could be a nice feature, because let's say you want to extrude this surface a certain distance back. You don't know what that distance is, but you know it has to be the width of this hole. Then you can select on one edge of the hole and select on the other. So there are things that you can translate width relationships across to other components. I don't know. There's just stuff like that. So if you want to move this surface exactly that far back, you won't be able to do it that way. I think you have to do it this way. If you want to slide that whole thing back. No? Oh, because there's not a pinch here. So this would have to be pinched in order to do what we were trying to do. There we go. Now, hopefully you guys saw that. I had to put a crease there. SketchUp will sometimes do that, but sometimes it will like try to fold the whole surface, but if there's too many of these points that it just doesn't have the liberty to move this line, then you have to create like fold points. And then, well, anyways, let's say you have a model and you really like it, and you're like, yeah, let's make this model a real thing, and then you're like, let's print it out. How do we get this thing to the 3D printer? I like to set it on origin. Now, if you noticed, it looked like it was, but it's a little off. You don't have to have these on origin, but you do need to pick a surface that's flat. That flat surface is going to be what you're printing from. Let's say you want to rotate this thing, and you're building an object like this, and you're like, that overhang just can't print. I mean, if you have like a lot of supports and you're ready for it to take a lot longer to print, then yeah, I guess you could print this thing. But it's just more logical to print it this way. Okay. So let's say we got this thing, and I want to print this darn thing. What do I do? Well, I would suggest first to save your work before you try to do anything else. Save it as, I don't know, test 1 on the desktop, SketchUp, save. SketchUp can take a second or two to fully save. Is it saved? Yeah, it's saved. Sometimes really big models, it can take like 30-45 seconds. Okay, so you're going to select the part, and it can be in a component or a group is fine. And then you're going to export. Go to File, Export, 3D Model. Alright. The thing is about SketchUp is it only produces DAE. I don't know what a Google Earth file. I think that's some type of a photograph from Google of satellite photos. Well, anyways, a collada is a DAE file. That's all it produces. So we're pretty much stuck there. Make sure you save it in a location that you know where it's going to go, and go ahead and just export it. So I exported this to my desktop. You can just reduce that. SketchUp isn't too demanding on your on running in the background, unless you have a huge file. So here's your DAE on the desktop, test one. DAE files, the best program I found is Meshlab. Meshlab up here, the little eyeball figure. Hopefully you haven't been missing stuff. The little eyeball figure. You can just, once you have the files associated, well, I'll go ahead and just open Meshlab. Once the files are associated, you can just open them from the icon, from the file icon. File, open project, and let's see, I think this is desktop. No, I'm sorry, cancel that. Open import mesh, this little folder here. I thought there was an import. Yeah, import mesh, Control I. So import mesh, and then go up to desktop, test one, open it, and say okay. This is a cool program. It's free, and you can do a lot of stuff with it, but it's really difficult to use. So like filters, let's just open up one. There are all these different options for filtering and re-rendering and changing this program. I don't use them very often except for in one situation, but we're going to skip that for just this very second. What I typically do is I just use this program to convert the mesh to an STL. We all want the STL. That's the file type. So export mesh as, and then you go down to the file of type, and you can change this to an STL file format. And notice the file name changes to test1.stl, and then you just save it. Hit OK, and I guess you can do stuff, but I just hit OK, and it outports it perfectly. Now let's say you go to Thingiverse and you get this like rocket ship that I showed in a different video, and that thing's like 12 megabytes, or maybe you get Benchy, and Benchy is like I think 30 megabytes or something like that, or maybe up to 100. That thing is bloody huge. So what I would recommend, pardon my English, when you have imported, use Meshlab to open up your crazy huge STL file, you would then go to filter and go to remeshing, simplification, and reconstruction. So your simplification is the key here. You want to simplify this mesh. Now you'll have to follow the mouse all the way out, and then go down to quadratic edge collapse decimation. Quadratic edge collapse decimation. It's like a third of a mouthful. Okay, so I don't really mess with target number of faces. I guess you could. I'm not sure about quality threshold. I just leave it as is. But percentage reduction, that's where it's all at. So let's say you want it to be half of the file size, then you would do 0.5. And this mesh is insanely simple. For the most part, hopefully it holds the shape of the square and it just simplifies the domes. I mean, this mesh is tiny, so I wouldn't do this on something like this, but you would do this on like Venus de Milo, or the Nike Victory, Winged Victory of Samothrace, like something like that. Yes, you would want to reduce it because those can be over 100 megabyte files. So you would just click apply after you altered your percentage of reduction. Okay, this doesn't look good because I'm trying to cut down so many faces that it's like oversimplifying this. It's getting rid of stuff. It's just, this model is way too simple. So I guess we could maybe, let's do our Control Z. Nope, it's not going to do it. It's the only program that you can't use Control Z. Well, we could just close this. We don't have to save it or anything. It actually put, yes, no, that's the SketchUp file. Where did it go? There's test one. So this is the one that we just converted from the regular mesh. This is how it came in, and we converted it to the STL. So the STL would then be, you'd be able to open that in Meshlab, or not Meshlab, I'm sorry, Repetier Host. I'm going to try this quadratic edge collapse decimation, and I'm going to do something with a percentage of like 0.9, just so it's a tiny reduction, and maybe I won't lose too much. Yeah, I still lose too much. Well, it doesn't work all the time. It does some funny things, but on large models with like tens of millions of faces, it's perfect. It does an incredible job. So let's go ahead and leave that. Here's your STL. So as normal, you would open Repetier Host. And just to verify that this thing does load that model that we were trying to, we're building just to goof off on. So you can either load from this load, or you can do the add object up here. I think you can load from here. I don't ever hardly do it this way, but I'll go ahead and try it. So there's your test one STL. Open it. There it is. I think that thing is way smaller than what we drew it. I think, let me actually measure it. Just real quick. Let's see what's going on here. Okay, from end to end, 208. This thing should be the size of our printer bed, a little bit longer than the printer by 167. So what happens is this thing is imported in inches, or no, it's imported in millimeters. The thing about Meshlab is that you can scale it if you want and change the, so let's see. Sorry, this is turned almost into a Meshlab tutorial. Filters, normal, curvature, orientation. So in normals, curvatures, and orientation, you can transform scale, and then you can scale this to, if you just change one of them. So it would be 25.4. I'm sorry, it's going to go to inches, so 25.4. Oh, that's right. This is an odd program that a programmer wrote, and I remember reading that you have to like work to get the number right. Okay, so you just change one of them, 25.4, which is the conversion. Apply it, close it. So we just scaled it from it outporting in inches to outporting in millimeters. Now it only outport or exports a number, like a value. It doesn't know that it's inches or millimeters. It just says, well, this needs to be 200 units. So we're going to change this to 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Alright, so back to Repetier Host. This thing's tiny. So you can either scale it in Repetier Host to the same exact thing, 25.4, and you'll notice it's just a little bit longer than the bed, and so it's supposed to be like 167 by 208, something like that, which is ridiculous, but whatever. That's how we drew it. So you can delete the object with that, and then you can, I think the printer was set up in configuration to be in, okay, let's go back to millimeters. You can also, you can import in inches. You would just have to reload the file. That would be 1 was in inches, so there it is. Now if we go back to millimeters, you can load the file that was in millimeters, which is the 1, 2 that we converted and scaled up. So it's both the same thing. So if you are in millimeters and you load inches, which is the 1, you're going to get the problem like that, right? Alright, well, hopefully that covers everything that you would most likely need to use. Also on your models, when you load them in here, sometimes you'll see like green faces, and sometimes you'll get, this object is not manifold. It means it's not watertight, there's gaps. You might be able to make out a gap in here if I carefully position the camera. Sometimes the slicer program just doesn't recognize some of the edges correctly. but you can use other programs to fix those meshes and doctor them up. But anyhow, you guys get the picture. That's the whole tutorial. It's been 50 minutes. I'm out of here. Thanks, guys. Bye.